Yeah, so I will give my brief commentary on the recent retail chain stores closures in Uganda and of course East Africa at large. Um, I have heard some commentators trying to say that the pending closure of ShopRite supermarkets is a result of the COVID-19 pandemic adverse effects on the economy. Well, we cannot we cannot rule that out. I mean, every business in Uganda has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and it is understandable that some people have run out of business. I mean, I've seen so many schools which are on sale now, but we also do not forget that prior to COVID-19 pandemic, Tuskys closed its stores. If you are remaining, we saw Nakumat closing its stores from 2017 up to 2019 in East Africa, leaving so many people stranded and losing jobs. But we can discuss the impact later. For now, allow me to first understand what are the reasons behind the closures. What is on paper, majority of the companies that are closing, the stores that are closing, are telling us all are declaring bankruptcy. In other words, their assets cannot pay off their creditors, in which case they file for bankruptcy. They cannot even pay wages to their workers. They cannot pay suppliers, huge suppliers. They can't pay loans in their banks. They can't meet their rent obligations where they are situated. It is what we have seen with Nakumat and what we saw with Tuskys and Uchumi. Now, part of that idea, especially for retail stores that are originating within East Africa, specifically Kenya, it has been, you don't blame the business model. I mean, with the opening up of the East African community, when we became a customs union, customs common market, the had to take advantage of the East African market, and which would not be saturated, which was not yet saturated by leading suppliers. So by providing goods to and services to the people in Kenya was not enough. They had to expand to East Africa to take care of the market and take care of the consumers that are spread across the East African countries. Now, that overambitious expansion is a good model, but it needs to be controlled also, because it comes with lots of considerations and assumptions which need to be taken care of. For instance, we know that among the East African countries, well, as we share common boundaries and typical business dealings, including what we import and export, our purchasing powers in terms of purchasing power parity in the different countries are different. So you may choose to invest in Uganda, for instance, when the purchasing power of the people there is lesser than what is in Kenya or what is in Kigali, Rwanda, or what is in South Sudan. All those aspects, I don't want to say that the business owners did not take care of them. I'm aware they should have done that analysis, but the fluctuations of the same have an impact on the business success in the different countries. So different countries have peculiarities in terms of purchasing power, and that is a very critical issue. So you may wish to take advantage of the opening up of the borders and take advantage of the East African expanded market and expand profusely so that you have branches everywhere. But this one has an impact on your costs, and of course, if the costs are not being compensated by the purchasing power of the nationals who are taking your products, that will of course leave you in a situation of liability. So that was one issue that I think should have caused issues with those East African retail chain stores in that aspect. Yeah, the second issue that most people never wish to discuss boldly is to do with taxation. I mean, we saw that while Nakumat was at the peak of its closure, left with about only 6 branches across East Africa. The Uganda Revenue Authority swung in to close its other branch on Nakumat or West Mall in Kampala, demanding over 300 million Uganda shilling in tax areas. The tax component is very critical. I mean, if you are always in court battles to pay taxes, to the national that is hosting you, how would you then be able to manage the day-to-day operations of the retail store? So that aspect is very critical, and it will bring me to the discussion on ShopRite. ShopRite is a South African company owned by a millionaire who is among the top wealthiest, the third, I think by around 2019 he was the third wealthiest man in South Africa, and I think he was in the top 400 across the world. A very rich man who is invested in so many business and chains which are managing different business aspects. But beyond the story is also a great attempt to implement schemes that are targeting what we call aggressive tax planning, which started way back in 2004, and also cases of anti-competition regulations trying to circumvent them. Now, this is way back in his home country in South Africa. I mean, there were even issues that were associated with perceived money laundering when UK officials intercepted the top owner of the ShopRite investments, ShopRite holdings, with over 700,000 million US dollars in cash being taken out to Luxembourg for investment. His lawyers succeeded in convincing the UK officials that actually this was within the law, but it triggered investigations by the South African Revenue Authority and the other authorities in South Africa to establish the actual income of this gentleman. And now what happens in such a case is that later on the ShopRite holdings was scrapped by the taxman with a bill of about 2 billion rands in tax areas, and he was meant to pay that to the authorities. Now, when you engaged in such battles, and there's also another case of anti-competition abuse in South Africa again, where ShopRite owns a ticketing company which was monopolizing the market by issuing tickets for so many advertisements and the rest. So when you combine all that trouble in business, it is very difficult that you will remain afloat. And that's why we saw ShopRite now starting to close businesses across Africa and wherever it was situated. And the last one was in Uganda, where people thought it is an impact of COVID-19. I think there was no better time to close shop other than the COVID-19 pandemic, because everyone can afford to blame the pandemic on the closure, but it goes beyond. It is a story beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. I think what needs to be investigated, especially for those who are doing investigative journalism, and I'm speaking this from a perspective of tax justice activism. We are seeing, for instance, in Kenya, Carrefour and Naivas taking over some of the former shops that were owned by Nakumatt and ShopRite, and Carrefour is taking care of them. And we're wondering which muscle does Carrefour have to own what was formerly owned or rented by those other stores. I think for the interest of journalists, it would be nice to know if there is not even racketeering between those owners to do internal internal fraud arrangements, so that they deprive the suppliers of the incomes but they invest them elsewhere. Who knows? For instance, we know that the owner of ShopRite takes lots of his proceeds in tax havens. Luxembourg is one of them, and what that now implies in terms of implications, both in Africa and Uganda in particular. Beyond losing jobs, of course, we know it's a very big impact on the job market and, of course, on the revenue that is being earned by the Uganda Revenue Authority. But we also do not forget that aggressive tax planning, whereas it may appear very legal in terms of the tax laws, it can have adverse impact on the local communities where that entity is being established. Now, you can imagine if, for instance, ShopRite has to pay tax bills in South Africa, and that leads to closure of its business in Uganda. It means many people are going to be left without jobs. So if they are left without jobs, then the dependence and the multiplier effect of that will go a long way, reaching the grassroots level, and that's the impact we see that aggressive tax planning can lead to. And people will tell you, well, it is illegal. It is legal to any business person would love to avoid as much tax as possible. But you see, the moral issue on the impact and what it causes might be larger than if it was actually outright tax evasion. So for the investigative journalists, I think there is a need to analyze the stories beyond the stories. There's more than that meets the eye. So let's not blame every business closure on the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we have seen business which have closed before that, and they have been giving different reasons. I mean, if you look at the reports of ShopRite, for instance, the annual reports of ShopRite since 2019, 17, 18, 19, they were showing that the business is actually doing well. How can a business that is doing very well in terms of books of accounts start filing for bankruptcy? And these books of accounts are actually in public domain, they're accessible over the internet. So there is more to do in terms of investigative journalism to outrightly discuss what is the reason behind these closures, and also that teaches a lesson for government that is attracting investment to do due diligence on some of these owners. And that's why we are very proud that the current tax system and tax policy is trying to implement what we are calling beneficial ownership regulations that are targeting to understand the true owners of certain entities and follow them up to see their sources of income, where their trusts are, and how solid they are in terms of business sustainability. I mean, no one would wish to see a shop that has run for so many years close business in a country that would dwindle the investment. The general investment climate and the confidence in the economy is likely to be impacted upon. I mean, it's not a good sign, but it's good to put out there to the paying investors that actually the true causes of some of these closures may not be controllable by the state, but they are within the owners and the ownership structure of the entities. So we could discuss this further, but that was my own commentary, and I would think people who are interested in gathering much information on the business operations, especially these companies that are operating beyond one country, should take more keen interest in doing their and in thinking about their taxation aspects and the beneficial ownership aspects, and then how their owners operate in their home country before they come to invest in our own country. Thank you very much.